torn apart.
It was
and tatty.
Well, that belonged to my granny.
Mm.
She had it on her bed because as she got more poorly and they moved in with your granny, they were in separate beds and she had that on her bed because it was like blue silky, wasn't it? And
And
then
the silk was so thin that I'd pull it apart while I was
Yeah.
sleeping. Cause
it was rotten, you
Mm.
know, it was so old and it had just shredded because it had gone rotten. But you used to put your arm inside the quilt
Mm.
because that was you didn't have a comfort blanket or
No.
anything like that, so that was just one of the things you did, was you put your arm inside it, and that's why it got more and more shredded because you slept with your arm inside it, and then when you got really good at sewing you wanted to still have that actual quilt but cover it on both sides.
As a child, I picked at its surface and stretched its innards, with little regard for the integrity of its construction. I unpack, surprised at the quilt's specific imitation of my memory of it, though it has shrunk as I have grown. But now the silk is threadbare. While I uncovered, I found myself wondering where it went. No dust arose from the inside. It was sealed. I wonder if I have misinterpreted the state of disrepair in retrospect. Perhaps it washed away. I knew at the time that I had stitched the patches together unevenly, without enough care or respect for the fibre held within them. Removing the outer shell, equally hastily, felt overdue. The uncovering alludes to ritual, almost, as I remember the habitual comfort of placing my arm in between the layers, through a hole made in equal parts by wear and by picking. Under the surface, into the slight itch of the wadding. Comfort for sleep, and a task for sleeplessness, I made holes and stretched. The wadding is polyester, maybe a blend, as is the backing. They are both so stubbornly intact. Perhaps the silk is not silk at all. There is an uncertainty now, something ancient and precious, almost nearly disintegrated at the surface. It must be real, and yet here it is layered up with roughness and with plastic. The quilt belonged to my mother's mother's mother. She had it on her bed because as she got more poorly, she moved in with my grandmother. She was in a separate bed from her husband, and she had it on her bed. It was blue silky, wasn't it? The silk was rotten, it was so old, and it had just shredded because it had gone rotten. You used to put your arm inside the quilt, because that was... Well, you didn't have a comfort blanket or anything like that. That's just one of the things you did. You put your arm inside it while you were sleeping, and that's why it got more and more shredded.
I don't know what she did for a living before she got married. In those days, you usually gave up what you were doing. If your husband was going to provide for you, you'd give up what you were doing beforehand. But I imagine that it was something to do with stitching, but I can't actually say that that's the case. But she definitely saw her role as keeping her home. She was a brilliant cook. Her house was immaculate, and she kept her children and grandchildren clothed